Just a reminder before today's programme that the previous instalment of AMTV Radio is here to listen to with our special guest, Harry's Haunted House. And now it's time for the latest instalment of AMTV Radio, featuring this week's special guest, Beware. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of AMTV Radio. This is the podcast where I'm joined by a very special guest each time, and we discuss, well, whatever we want to, really. And in this special episode, we have, well, my special guest for today is YouTuber Beware. Beware, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem, dude, not a problem. Now, I was aware of your channel. I think the first video that popped up in my recommended was your video saying why Peter Capaldi, in your opinion, is the best Doctor, if I'm correct.
Yes, that is what it was, yeah.
And I watched it because I'm a big Capaldi fan, and he's personally my favourite actor to take on the role, and Series 8 is personally my favourite season of the revival era. But we'll talk more about that later. Before we get into, because we've already talked on Twitter and we've got some things planned we want to talk about, but before we do that, do you want to just let the audience know, those who might not be aware of you and your channel, just kind of the work you do, what sort of videos you put out there?
Yeah. So, really broadly, I describe myself as narrative analysis, and what that really means is I talk about stuff that I like, why it's good, and how it could be better.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, I talk a lot about Doctor Who, but I also do, like Marvel, DC, a whole bunch of anime stuff. And my current big project is, and we'll get into this. I'm not a fan. Yeah. I'm not a fan of series 11 or 12, and so I'm completely remaking them as audio dramas with a team of fans. Yeah. Yeah.
And the first one, I believe, just came out at the time we're recording this. It dropped yesterday, didn't it? The first episode.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, I gave it. I've been doing a lot of things today, but I managed to listen to the first 10 minutes before I had to shoot off. And to be honest, I was really enjoying what I was hearing. I enjoy the production, I enjoy the actors you've got taking part in it, and I enjoy the writing. So for anyone listening who may have been a bit, dissatisfied with the Chibnall era so far, definitely go and check that out on Beware's channel. But as you say, we can talk more about that a bit later on, because of course the main talking point, as we discussed on Twitter, we're going to talk about the Chibnall era, and I think specifically first we should talk about the Timeless Children, or everybody's favourite, as I like to call it, because everyone loves the Timeless Children, right? No, so, I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people know already when it debuted, it pretty much divided the fandom even more than the fandom already is, arguably. Me personally, I'm in the camp that enjoyed it for the most part. It wasn't perfect, there were things I would change, but I enjoyed the episode for what it was, and as you stated, I believe you're not in that camp, and just to open the floor, so to speak, would you like to explain why?
Yeah, so really quick, like a disclaimer, everything up to the Timeless Children I didn't like under Chibnall's run, but I was able to accept it. Like, it's just, Doctor Who has been good, it's been bad, I'm not really, upset or anything. I really, really hated the Timeless Children. And you said you found me from my Peter Capaldi video. That's my most popular. My second most popular is a 20-minute rant where I break down every single reason why the Timeless Children doesn't work.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I should say, before, I have like a little tiny checklist of like 4 major things that I don't like about it. If you enjoy it, it's like, it's subjective whether or not you enjoy it. That's not something I can say you're wrong about. Yeah. I think there are objective flaws in it that we can, break into. But yeah, like I don't hold any ill will if you like it.
No, of course. And I think that's what, again, to anyone listening, what I've tried to do on this podcast when I'm debating guests about things is like, we might have different opinions, but the point of this whole thing is that we can hear each other, nothing's being misconstrued, we're listening to each other's opinions. And just because, sometimes on social media, I think when it's just text, it can get a bit nasty quite quickly because there's that barrier, so to speak. So yeah, it's just going to be an open floor, and yeah, do you want to kick off with whatever point you like? Let's get into it. I'm in the zone now. I'm ready.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna say the first points, and then we can argue them one by one. So
sure.
The first point I have is that it has a ton of plot holes. It doesn't make any sense. The second plot hole, it takes away the Doctor's agency. The third problem, it changed a lot, but nothing at all. And then the fourth one, it's an origin story. So those are all problems I have with it.
Okay, sure.
The first one we can talk about, the plot holes. So when I made this video, I made the mistake of trying to find as many as I could through the whole canon, and the very first one I touch on is the Valyard, which was a dumb decision on my part, because that doesn't fit with anything. But I think there's a much more concrete way that we can probably agree on how it doesn't make sense. So, first you have to answer, does the Doctor have infinite regenerations or not? Mm-hmm. Right? We're not sure. Mm-hmm. If she does or if she doesn't, it doesn't make sense either way. So, if she does have infinite regenerations, how did the 11th Doctor run out in Time of the Doctor?
Yep.
And then if she does, if the Time Lord somehow restricted that ability of the Timeless Child so she doesn't have infinite regenerations, then who is Ruth as the Doctor?
Yes.
Because some people say she would fit between the second and third Doctor. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is that would mean the Doctor has to have more than 13 regenerations. Mm-hmm. But if she came before Hartnell, then you have to explain why her TARDIS looks like a police box, which also doesn't make any sense. So if no matter how you look at it, the addition of the Timeless Children, it does not fit cleanly in the canon. Like, you cannot explain it. That's my first major problem. Yes,
and I think in terms of how you put it, on that sense, to some extent, I agree, because I was in the camp where the second avenue, you said, with the whole thing of somehow Tecteun found a way to initially restrict the Timeless Child's, unlimited regenerations down to 12. So you could argue, forgetting Joe Martyn for a minute, the whole thing with Matt Smith being the last incarnation, that fits to start with, but I completely agree with you. The only flaw for me in that theory is the whole presence of the Joe Martyn Doctor, basically. As you say, is it between 2 and 3, but then that throws that off. So yeah, I agree with you. It's good. We're agreeing so far. That's good. But yeah, I definitely agree with you on that sense, how it doesn't make sense purely because Joe Martyn is the roadblock for me, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. If she wasn't there, I'd be like, okay, this is it. She had unlimited, Tecteun restricted it, and then the Time Lords or whoever gave it back at the end of Matt Smith's time. That'd be fine. But yeah, the Joe Martyn Doctor, for me at least, is the big roadblock. So yes, I agree with you there hugely. Also for me, with the plot hole thing, did you make much sense of this whole thing with the division?
Well, that's another thing that I really don't like. But the division seems like it's antithetical to everything that the Time Lords are. They're all about not interfering, right?
Sure.
So, what logistical part of the division's existence are you talking about?
Well, I think it was. I sort of got more towards the end, when the Doctor's seeing the guy in Ireland being electrocuted, and you could argue it's in theorizing that was the moment when the Time Lords, remove the Doctor's past memories of anything pre-Hartnell. But it was more the scene where it's the woman talking to, the two people, sort of trying to explain what the division is, and I sort of get it. I sort of see it as like a perversion of, the CIA, the Celestial Intervention Agency that had been introduced way back. But I just think the way they try and explain the division is almost too convoluted for its own good, if that makes sense. Yeah, go on, sorry.
No. I was just going to say that if you look at this from a meta standpoint, it's pretty clear Chibnall he had this Timeless Child idea and he wanted to do it. He took it to the BBC, and they said, that's great. Let's also do this division thing so that we can make a spin-off about it. Because the division very clearly seems to be shoved in there so we can have a spin-off. That's what it seems like to me.
I think that's a good way of putting it. If you take out the bit mentioning the division, you could argue it flows a little bit better. The fact they try and shoehorn this in the span of about 3 minutes of screen time, it's a bit So what, I was sort of left thinking, okay, so what really is this thing, and why are we talking about it? It just sort of comes and goes really quickly.
Yeah, either the BBC wants to do a spin-off or it's going to be plot relevant later, because otherwise it really makes no sense. Yeah,
exactly. I think there was a lot of the points in the Timeless Children where I found myself saying, okay, they're going to explain that in Series 13. Do you know what I mean? The whole thing, Joe Martyn's Doctor, I thought maybe after Fugitive of the Judoon, they'd explain really what she was or where she fitted in the Timeless Children. They didn't really do that, so now my brain's sort of well, I hope they do it in Series 13, and as you say, again, if they don't, then it's kind of well, what was the whole point of this, really? And then Big Finish will pick up the pieces. So
Big Finish always picks up the pieces.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, I guess that's sort of the difference between, the more optimistic and pessimistic fans. I don't have faith that they're going to answer all these questions or fill in these plot holes. Yeah. I would if it were like still Davies or even maybe Moffat. Moffat answered questions, but he did it with hand waves, but you still got answers, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Chibnall seems like he's all about the mystery, and then he sort of like forgets the mystery is even happening some part way through the series, and then someone has to remind him. But overall on that first point, as you said, the whole thing about the plot holes of the regenerations of the Timeless Child, basically, yes, I agree with you. I'm more towards that second theory, that Tecteun found a way to restrict it. But yes, the Joe Martin Doctor does stand firmly in the way of me being like, well, it's it's not a concrete belief. Do you know what I mean? That's the one I lean towards, but I can't say it with like 100% confidence. So yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Well, I actually had like 12 or so plot holes that I outlined when I made that video, but we don't need to go on to all of them. I just want to touch on one other one that I think is pretty damning. Mm-hmm. So, end of the 11th Doctor's run, Clara enters his time stream. Yes. It's not his memories, it's his time stream, and she doesn't see anyone before Hartnell. So where were all of these 100,000 doctors that supposedly existed,
Yeah, did Clara just see them and then just forget to mention them? No,
well, it's that she also convinces him to take the TARDIS, which apparently, if the Ruth Doctor's before Hartnell, he should have already had, so it's... Yeah.
Series 7 Clara, Series 8 Clara, on the other hand. No, my instant, I must admit, when you mentioned it, I hadn't thought of that outlook, I hadn't put that back in my head about Clara going in his time stream. My instant thought to that, as you said it, how in The Timeless Children, just, again, full disclaimer, I rewatched it, before we came on this evening, just to, really get it fresh in my head again. Mm-hmm. Could we argue that when the Master takes the Doctor into the Matrix and it's like he had to really dig around to find it, basically, almost like it was locked away, like from Time Lord consciousness, if you like, by, let's call them like, the supreme elite, like the top 2 or 3 in the Gallifreyan pantheon, if you like. Mm-hmm. Is it impossible to reason then that whilst this was locked away during Matt Smith's time, it was somehow because I always assume like time streams are interconnected with the Matrix, because that's like the repository of Time Lord knowledge, experience, whatever. So is it unreasonable to assume then, if it was locked away during Matt Smith's time, that's why it would have been present? Like maybe Clara, being completely losing my words here. Sorry, being completely like imaginative here. What if Clara was going to see those doctors, but then came up against some sort of mental barrier, wall, whatever you like? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it impossible to assume something like that?
So. I'll preface by saying this. It's Doctor Who, so you could literally give any answer, and technically it could be really stupid and it could still be right. My problem with that explanation is you're conflating, well, this is my memory, and memories are what's stored in the Matrix, and this is my time stream, which is like a physical representation of where I have been in my life.
Yeah.
And I never considered, and I don't think most people have, that these two are somehow the same thing. Mm-hmm. Because, like, if you were a complete amnesiac or you were in a coma your whole life, you would still have a time stream. Yeah. I don't think it's linked to your mind at all. So, you could make that argument. I would say this. If Chibnall comes out in Series 13 and says that, that's okay. But if it's just like fans applying this idea to it to try to make it make sense, then I wouldn't give him the benefit of the doubt for it. You know what I mean?
I'm going to write to Chris Chibnall right now and give him this idea. But
something tells me he doesn't listen to fan mail.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I don't think he reads mail full stop, quite frankly. But isn't it, just for a sidestep, isn't it ironic how we've got that clip of him from the 80s as a fan, like ripping into the show, and now like everyone's doing it now, and he's like, "What clip are you talking about? I don't know what you mean." Like, it's just so perfect. I think it's just such a beautiful irony.
Yeah, a lot of people have used it pretty creatively. I have an idea. I haven't used it yet, but I have an idea, and we'll see if I get around to using it in the next year or so.
I look forward to it, because whenever I watch like a Who video on YouTube that's about like either criticizing Chibnall or just the era, I'm like, where is it? Where's the clip? Where's the Chibnall clip? And
it's coming.
I'll look out for yours. Don't worry. I'm interested in how you use it. But Yeah, I mean, no, you're right. He doesn't read the mail, but so I get what you mean. Like, yes, I think, to be honest, I think a lot of fans do this. I know I'm guilty of it myself. As you say, when things like don't make sense in Doctor Who, even though it's Doctor Who, it doesn't. But I think there is a lot of degree of that fan level where we do just try and link as tenuous as things as possible just to make it fit. I'll admit that, like. As I said, my knee-jerk reaction to you putting that forward about Clara jumping into his time stream, that is my, knee-jerk, honest-to-God reaction, because my brain's probably picking at, the various strands, trying to make them connect. I completely agree. So say, had Moffat, when he wrote Name of the Doctor, when he wrote that, if he had said Clara was jumping into his memory stream, not time stream, would you have accepted that in retrospect, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, that would not be one of the plot holes that I'd point out if that were. Yeah, I'm not like trying to make up stuff.
No, of course not.
No, I know. I guess I'd put it this way. As fans of the show, we value different things. Like, some people like it because of the lore. Some people just think it's fun and they don't care about, any of the rules of it. Some people just watch it because they think the Doctor's hot, right? Like, I know there's a lot of Tennant fangirls out there. So, I value a lot of the lore and the background stuff, make sure that it makes sense. If you don't, or if anyone doesn't, that's fine. I think The Timeless Children is bad in other ways too, which is why I really don't like it.
No, that's fair. Do you want to move on to another point on why you think it's bad on that note?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go to the second one, which is sort of like a thematic one. It takes away the Doctor's agency. And what I mean by this is he used to be a Time Lord who was creative and kind, and those are the two things that set him apart from all of the other Time Lords. It's the reason that he left his home. He ran away. I mean, why he ran away is still kind of vague, but he just didn't fit in, right? Like, that was sort of the whole idea. Yeah. And became this hero across the universe. Now, the Doctor is special because she's literally genetically superior to everyone else. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah.
It takes away so much of the heart of the show and makes it, well, you're the chosen one, actually. And that's why you've always been better. And so it isn't as thematically rich, but also it's telling kids, like, it's not what you choose to do that makes you special. It's just what you are, like, genetically. Which is, I don't think most people agree with.
Sure. I hear what you're saying. I think the Timeless Children in other scenes, I would argue, puts across a more positive message to kids about who they are. Like, the scene early on when Graham sits down with Yaz and that he has that little, like, heart-to-heart with her, and he says something along the lines of, yes, we travel with the Doctor and she's amazing, but then, to Yaz, you don't have a time machine, you don't have a Sonic, and, if you want to add to that, you could argue, Yaz doesn't have any of the qualities of the Doctor. She can't regenerate, she's not this superior being. I don't know, rewatching it again, I just thought, again, for children watching, I thought that was a good way of saying you don't have to have all, like, this know-how or be different in that way. You can just be you and, succeed, be special, mean a lot to somebody. Do you know what I mean? That's what I got from... I get what you're saying completely about the Doctor embodying, like, this chosen one status, if you like, which, is more about what she is and how she was born superior rather than, other things. But would you agree that the Timeless Children, like, in that moment, takes the time to try and say to kids, like, you are special, basically, like, for who you are?
So, yeah, I recognize that is what they attempted to do. But I would not say they succeeded. I was actually going to bring up that point if we started talking about Chibnall's writing in a broader sense.
Sure.
Because in that scene, I know exactly what you're talking about. Graham is like, you're the most amazing, incredible woman I've ever met. You're awesome. And that's a nice thing to say, but I don't think it actually represents who Yaz has been for the past 20 episodes. She's a very, very blandly written character. All of her desires or goals they either are very simple or they're never shown. It's one of those things in writing where show don't tell. That is absolutely a moment where Graham turns to the audience and says, "Hey, Yaz is great, isn't she?" And and so I respect that they're trying to give this lesson to children, but it would be much more effective if A, they had shown it through Yaz actually being amazing instead of Graham just saying it, and B, kept that theme running not only through Yaz, but also through the Doctor and not having her be, quote, genetically superior to everyone else. You know what I mean? That's how you write a rich narrative, I think.
No, yeah, sure, completely. No, that's fair. No, in terms of what you say about like, you know, the Doctor embodying this chosen one persona, and now I'm just getting Anakin Skywalker memes in my head. All these high ground memes, like the high ground memes, they need to stop. But no, I get what you mean completely, and yes, the idea that the Doctor is this chosen one, it makes me think one of the things I didn't enjoy as much with the Timeless Children, and I don't know what you think on this, I thought it would have been much more interesting, if we're going with the Timeless Child narrative, if the Master was the Timeless Child and not the Doctor, because I thought that would have added so much more stakes to the situation in general. I think it would have given the Doctor that real sense of fear of the Master, because I think the Master is most powerful when the Doctor has that sense of that they fear them. Like, there are moments throughout particularly in Capaldi's time, there were moments when I could argue that, you know, the Doctor feared Missy in those moments, like, genuinely, which makes the Master more terrifying. And I think if he had been the Timeless Child, that would have added to that. And I think it just would have given him a lot more, a lot more motivation and motive to be the way, well, especially this way of the Master is, like the Sacha Dhawan Master. What do you think about that?
So a couple things. I think Sacha Dhawan is an amazing actor. I first saw him in Iron Fist. He was incredible. I think he's wasted on the writing of this series as the Master, which is kind of disappointing. But to your point about him being the Timeless Child, I've heard that theory, and I really like it. I think that would have been like way, way better. The only problem I have with this in the back of my nerd brain is, like, when we first meet the Master, he's running out of regenerations. So if you can say Tecteun, you know, limited the Timeless Child's regenerations, then yeah, I think that would be great, because not only does it make it more interesting, it doesn't make the Doctor the chosen one main hero, but it also fits with those themes that I was talking about before. Instead of the Doctor who was stood out because of who she chose to be, the Master has always stood out because he was seen as this crazy person, right?
Yeah.
Like he was, the Time Lords thought he was nuts. It makes sense that they would think that, because he literally does not fit in the same way. And then also the dynamic between the Master and the Doctor, and I go over this in my video much more. I sound much better. I have this prepared in essay format.
Yeah.
But the dynamic between them is that the Master sees the Doctor as, like, something about him is better, and he doesn't know what it is, and he hates that. But the Doctor views the Master as his equal, and that's why they can never agree. It's only until, you know, 12 and Missy finally considers that the Doctor, maybe I should just listen to him, that they finally get to, you know, agree again. And that, if the Master were the Timeless Child, that would fit great, because now he has a reason in his head to justify why he could never understand the Doctor. So
no, I just think that theory, that idea of the Master, like, when you weigh it up, like the possibilities, like with what we got, and then the ideas, like, especially like, for example, what you just put forward, I think it makes so much more sense for it to be the Master. And I don't know, maybe as you go through your audio series remaking the Chibnall era, if you want to include the Timeless Child element, then, you know, just saying, but we'll see. But
I haven't said this publicly, but I it's not a secret or anything. I don't want to touch the Master at all.
Okay.
I think Missy's arc and her ending, where she basically committed like a double suicide, was so good, so clever, so Master. I think the character should be done, personally.
Like done like for good.
Yeah, I really like that end to her arc. I think it's great.
No, I mean, I loved Michelle Gomez from the start, like, you know, the whole, from Series 8 onwards, and yeah, I agree, like, that whole arc of Series 10 in particular, her, you know, debating to be good and how that played out works so well. And I know it hasn't been confirmed sort of where Sacha Dhawan's Master fits in the Master's timeline, or if it has, I've definitely missed it. Do you have that annoying thing where sometimes Doctor Who will like reveal a very important lore point in like a random book released or like an annual or something like that? But to my knowledge, the Sacha Dhawan Master hasn't been confirmed where he is, and I'd like to think he doesn't follow Missy, because based on like, you know, what you said, the Missy arc ends so beautifully that to think they just invent, and then I regenerated and ran away and decided not to be good anymore. I think that would just shit on like everything the Missy arc tried to do. So I'd like to think he comes before that, but yeah, who knows? But Yeah, interesting. The Master done. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. What point would you like to move on to next?
Okay. So I talked about the plot holes, talked about taking away agency. This one really bothers me. People say that it's a positive, and I do not understand it.
Okay.
They say everything changed, but nothing's changed.
Yes.
Which is
I know
true.
I've used that phrase before.
Because so on the surface that means, well, our understanding of the lore has changed, but don't worry, the Doctor can still be herself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the positive interpretation. The way I see that is, all of the canon that you know and love has been retconned, and you don't even get any character development out of it.
Sure, yeah.
I see it as two negatives. So it really confuses me how people see it as two positive. If you're going to make a change that big, the characters should react accordingly. They should not stay the same. And in the episode, the Ruth Doctor looks to 13 and says, you don't have to change at all. Just continue being exactly the same. That really bothers me, like, a lot.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I'd like to, again, being like the the optimist and giving Chibnall some credit, although I think I'm giving him too much. I'd like to think to some extent in Series 13, or maybe even the New Year's special that's coming up, who knows. I'd like to think some of that, like some of those criticisms will be addressed in terms of, like, will the Doctor have to, like, change the way she is because of this, or will it get more explained? But I think, like, you made a very clear point, and I think it was a good argument that, like, that is insane speculation, and we are giving Chibnall way too much credit for his own good. But in terms of the lore being retconned, I understand how, because I'll admit I was very much in that camp of, like, yes, it was, it changed a lot, but also didn't change anything at all. And how I interpreted it, and this is literally, just from watching it, like, on first broadcast or whatever, my mind was like, okay, so we've opened up this whole new can of worms, if you like, of all these previous lives the Doctor's had before William Hartnell. And we, at the minute we don't know anything about them, we don't know how many there are, and, it means that William Hartnell isn't the first incarnation. I'd always maintain he is the first incarnation to refer to himself as the title of the Doctor. I see no reason why that, apart from the whole Joe Martyn thing, but we've discussed that. But again, put Joe Martyn to one side for a minute.
Sure.
I'd argue William Hartnell is still the first Doctor, as he is the first incarnation to title himself as such. All those previous ones, again, as far as we know and can speculate, did not refer to themselves as the Doctor. So that was always my answer to people who'd, like, come at me on Twitter and stuff saying, Hartnell's not the first Doctor anymore. I'd be like, he's not the first incarnation, but he is the first Doctor, in my personal opinion. I'd argue, I mean, yes, the lore has changed now, as you say. What I try and do now when I watch, because I watch a lot of classic Who anyway, as well as modern Who, I sort of just try and watch it, sort of for what it was at the time, almost with, like, the mindset of watching it at the time, trying not to bear that in mind. I'm not saying I ignore it. I think it'd be foolish to ignore it, but I feel if I dwelled on it too much, that might interfere with my enjoyment of classic Who, because there's certain stories for me which I hold very, like, close to me. They're very important, like, the Three Doctors or Tomb of the Cybermen, Remembrance of the Daleks. And for me, I can still watch those, with the knowledge of what we know from the Timeless Children, but not let that affect my enjoyment. Is that different for you? Like, when you watch, say, classic or modern Who now, has that dampened your enjoyment of it, so to speak?
Well, I mean, to be as frank as possible, when the Timeless Children came out, this sounds a little dark, but there was, like, a week of mourning within a good chunk of the fandom. People really hated it, and I was one of those people. And to be honest, it like leaves this bleak shadow over the rest of it, because I really don't like it. And now so I am affected. I go back and I watch, like, a Troughton episode or something. I'm like, well, this guy isn't the second Doctor. This isn't the first time he's used the sonic screwdriver or whatever, But I guess I'm a good example. It was so bad for me that I've decided to pretend it didn't happen so much that I'm redoing it. Like, that was the reason. It was not because I personally wanted to write Doctor Who, which I do, but it's more so that, like, I need something in my brain that is an alternative to what actually happened, because it really does bother me.
Sure. I mean, do you think, again, we've already established that Chibnall probably doesn't even read fan mail, never mind general mail, but do you think from all this backlash, because, even though I'm more positive towards it, I think it's foolish to try and ignore that there has been a big backlash against this, like a huge backlash.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's impossible that in Series 13 they will find a way to either retcon it or change it or, just basically make it so, like you said, it almost didn't happen, or they dampen down the effects because of the backlash? Or do you think they'll just keep plowing on, like, regardless of anything else?
I'm sort of split down the middle. See, I think... on the one hand, I want it to be decanonized. I want the Timeless Children thing to not have happened. But on the other hand, I don't think, it would take some serious guts to make a huge change and then one series later be like, haha, just kidding.
Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. That's why I'd lean more towards they're not going to do anything about it, at least in the immediate future, because as you say, it is so soon. Maybe when a new showrunner comes in eventually, if they don't agree with it, maybe they might try something. We've seen that in, I'm sure, to use comic books as an example. You said you're a fan of the MCU and the DC universe, so I'm sure you know all too well from comics, the amount of retconning that goes on. And yes, I know you've got more leeway in comics because you can pretty much do whatever you want without restrictions of a TV budget or anything like that. But we've seen it in TV shows as well, of all kinds. So I'd say it wouldn't be impossible that it might happen one day, but I think I'm with you in the sense that I don't think it's going to happen in the next series, not really.
Well, I was actually going to make a video about this. I mean, I could just pitch it to you now.
Sure.
One single story that would wrap it all up, and it would be interesting, and it wouldn't feel like a retcon. Mm-hmm. Okay? You just have either 13 or maybe the 14th Doctor, whoever... if let's say it's 13, she runs into a situation where there are a large number of people who are injured, okay? Mm-hmm. But knowing that she is the Timeless Child, she has infinite regeneration energy. So she decides to just give this regeneration to these people, this energy to these people, and heal them. Once she does so, you see the Ruth Doctor appear out of nowhere, and she starts laughing, and she says, "Ha ha ha! I tricked you. I was the master the entire time."
Ooh.
I invented the entire Timeless Children concept and tricked you into thinking it was you. You don't have infinite regenerations. In fact, now you have 0 because you just gave me all of your regeneration energy. And then you have an explanation for Ruth, you retcon the Timeless Children, and you have a new plot thread. Uh-oh, the Doctor's out of regenerations. What's she gonna do? That's how I would do it.
Well, you said that was a pitch. I like it. Run with that, man. That's really cool. But again, I think that's a tangible thing that could happen. I know Ruth said she's the Doctor, but we haven't, there's nothing to suggest that she couldn't be the Master or, someone out to get her. So, yeah, I think that idea holds a lot of credence. Yeah, definitely make a video on that, man. I mean, by the time this comes out, you might have already made it. But yeah, I think you've really got me thinking on that now. That'd be really cool.
And I was, I was giving that some thought. And you have Ruth's Doctor is very no nonsense, and then you have Sacha Dhawan's Master, who's very energetic. I think if they were both the Master, that would be a really powerful duo. They would bounce off each other pretty well.
Yeah, they'd sort of even each other out when they need to as well. If the Sacha Dhawan was getting too energetic, the Joe Martin would just slow him down a bit, and vice versa. That'd be a really cool dynamic. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
But just talking about the Master for a second, and this might be me reading into it, but there was a scene in the Timeless Children where it almost makes me think that the Master at this point in his life is longing for death. It's the scene, when he shrinks the lone Cyberman into a doll, which I must admit that was disappointing, how this big threat of the lone Cyberman was literally just brushed aside in about 3 seconds. And he says something like, "Oh, I thought when I shrunk you the death particle would have activated and it all would be over. Oh, I'd be happy with that." He says something like that, and just the way Sacha Dhawan gives it as a performance, it just makes me think the Master, in whatever stage of his life he's in, is comfortable with the idea of dying, almost like it'll end. Again, we don't know if at this point it's before the John Sim Master, with the whole drumming in his head thing. Although they do, you'd think if it was there, they would have mentioned it. But I just find it really interesting that there's this dynamic, because the Master's insane, as we all know. But do you think there's any credence in that at this point the Master could almost be longing or hoping for some kind of death, but to do it to go out in style, if that makes sense, via a death particle or something equally as grand?
I don't think the Master is necessarily longing for death. I think, and I've used this analogy before, that the Sacha Dhawan Master is basically just like a light version of the Joker, like from Batman. I think that's sort of what they wanted to model him after, which is not necessarily a bad idea. I think if executed properly, that could be a really cool version of the Master. The problem is they just took all of the very superficial aspects. So, like, there's a lot of physical comedy. He's loud. He makes, like, dumb jokes. Like, the cyber thing goes into him. He's like, buy me dinner first, or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, and I think being lackadaisy with your life, you know, being like, I don't care if I die. I think that's, like, a very Joker-ish type aspect they're trying to project onto him. That's kind of how I understood it anyway, yeah.
No, that makes sense. It's almost that, you know, that carefree aspect. He doesn't care if he lives or dies. He just wants to cause havoc and all that sort of stuff. Maybe it was in the performance then. That's just how I saw it on this viewing of The Timeless Children. It was almost like this, you know, melancholy way of, like, he was really disappointed that the death particle didn't activate when he shrunk the lone Cyberman. But no, I think that's a good take as well. See, this is why I love debates. You get so many different opinions and thoughts about things. Was it the fourth major point you had or the third? I can't remember.
Yeah, the last one I said, we didn't really talk about it. It was the changed a lot but nothing at all, which I think we just disagree. I don't know if there's really much to talk about with that one.
Yeah, I think it's hard to, like, quantify it, isn't it? But yeah, basically, like, I'm in the camp that I'll use that term and I'm, like, more comfortable with it, I guess. Is that fair to say? Like, I'm more comfortable with that analogy?
Yeah.
Than you are, maybe, necessarily?
It really just comes down to perspective. I view those two things as bad. You view them as, you know, potential good. You know, so that's just the last point I had is that this is an origin story. I why do you think they didn't give the Doctor an origin story for 57 years?
Because it's called Doctor Who.
Exactly. What if Star Wars didn't have any fights? What if Star Trek, they didn't go anywhere? It's called Doctor Who. It needs to be a question. Don't answer it.
Well, could you argue, even though with all these pre-incarnations, is it still Doctor Who because we don't know anything about them?
You could make that argument. I don't know how well it stands. I guess here's the thing. When Doctor Who first aired, it was complete mystery. And then we slowly got more and more and more until he's a Time Lord. He's from Gallifrey. He's roughly this old. This is his race. And then, you know, around the 7th Doctor, there was the Cartmel Master Plan, which for anyone who isn't familiar, that's the idea that the Doctor is actually this ancient Time Lord called the Other, who, along with Rassilon and Omega, founded Time Lord Society, but then he got reincarnated either through the looms or something else into the Doctor today. They never actually went through with that. They just sort of implied it a couple times in Sylvester McCoy's run. And I love that. Like, that is one of my favorite elements of the lore of the show, because it's vague and it's interesting, and they never confirmed it. With this, there's not a lot vague, because we literally see this is the child that is the Doctor. They came out of this thing. Just making a big portal isn't mysterious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
There has to be a level of intrigue, because literally anything could be behind the portal. That's less interesting than there was this Time Lord. We don't know who or what. You know, in the Other. To me, that's much more intriguing than big sky portal, little girl come out. You know, I
mean, they literally called the portal the Infinite. I mean, how on the like the infinite amount of things this portal could be. Oh, we'll just call it the Infinite. That sounds mysterious. It doesn't sound mysterious. I must admit, I wasn't happy. They were like, she came from the Infinite. I was like, oh, is that so? The Infinite, right? No, I'm with you. The Cartmel Master Plan, like that whole ethos. I know, obviously, they didn't follow through with it. That they'd sort of like tease it here and there. But I'm with you. The Sylvester McCoy era is like one of my favorite eras, purely for those moments when the Doctor is really, you know, mysterious and just does these things, and you're like, why are you doing it? But it never really elaborates on it. But that's what gives him like the power and the mystique in a way. I mean, even to the point where I love the scene in. I know a lot of people don't like it, but you know, Silver Nemesis, when Lady Painful, you know, claims to know who the Doctor is, who he actually is, and you know, obviously at the end, Ace asks, and he just puts his finger to his lips. As like, you could argue that's on the nose, whatever, but I love that moment. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's teasing you like, oh, someone actually knows who he is, and he's just not budging whatsoever. We had it arguably with the first appearance of River Song in David Tennant's time. You know,
Yes.
he's the fact she knows his name, and obviously he hasn't met her yet or met her since. That terrifies him. You see it in his performance. You know, he's genuinely worried that someone knows who he is behind this title of the Doctor, so to speak.
Yeah.
So go on. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, Moffat playing with the Doctor's name really helped with that whole intrigue thing. Like I said, he sort of hand-waved it and made, the name's important now because of the whole Trenzalore thing. But even that, because I watched Revival before I went and watched Classic Who. That was my first taste of, why don't we know his name? Why can't we know his name? That's interesting. You know, that's the intrigue thing. Yeah, so I would argue that that's like the modern series attempt at making him more mysterious. And I think it works.
Yeah, because it sort of lures you in. I mean, calling an episode The Name of the Doctor, obviously people instantly will assume you're going to say his name, when of course, you know, it was actually in the name of the Doctor, so to speak, whatever. Yeah, you're right. Moffat was always very on the edge, I think, with, you say, like the hand-waving sort of stuff. And, I mean, one thing a lot of people don't like of the Revival era is how much, obviously, Clara seems to have an input in it. You know, with the whole... her telling him to get the TARDIS, and then her moment in Listen, even though I really enjoy Listen as a story. But do you think moments like that, do they not like ruin some of the mystery? Not all of it, but like some of it, do you think? Or are they more acceptable, those like Clara moments?
Well, so I totally get why they annoy certain people. I'm a little biased because I watched that era first. Like, literally,
Okay.
the first episode I ever watched of the show was Name of the Doctor, which I know
God.
It's a horrible place to start.
I bet you were like, who are the, like, William Arnold comes on, who the hell is this? Like,
Yeah,
what's going
yeah. I was on Google Plus of all places because it was like 2014 or something,
Oh,
or
man,
2013.
dark times.
Yeah, right. And I was intrigued. How can the main character? How do you not know his name? And that got me to watch the show. And then I went back and watched Eccleston. You know, so I'm a little biased towards those moments where Clara interferes with his life. You know, she's very, very influential. I think that, like, from a writing perspective, that's a poor decision to make a companion so important to the Doctor. At least in his past. If you want to do it in his present, that's fine. Amy or Rose, making them really important to the Doctor in the present, I'm cool with that. So I would try to avoid that. But that's the thing. If Moffat or Davies or anyone wants to make something a landmark in the Doctor's life now, that's fine. But to go back in time and kind of, I think it's like overstepping your boundaries. You know, like,
Sure.
you've been entrusted this show that's really old. And you're sort of saying, not only do I have the right to shape its future, but I also have the right to shape its past. And that's one of the reasons I don't like the Timeless Children so much. But to a much lesser extent, the little elements with Clara, yeah, I would put them in the same camp.
Yeah, because is it that thing you talked about earlier, like how, you know, in the Timeless Children, it almost elevates the Doctor into this, you know, place of superiority based on, you know, her genes or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, is it not the same with Clara almost being placed on this superior pedestal compared to like every other companion, purely because she's gone back into the Doctor's past? She was the one who told him to take the TARDIS that he took. She's the one who told him to be brave amongst the monsters in Listen, or, you know, whatever that speech was. Is that not sort of a similar? I know it's not to the same extent because it's not the main character, but isn't that sort of a similar thing?
I would say it's almost 100% the same thing. Yeah. The only reason it doesn't bother me is it's not called Clara Who, and she's only around for 3 series. The Doctor will be around for the entire show, and so doing it for the Doctor is a problem.
Series 7 may as well have been called Clara Who. I mean, the whole, she's the impossible girl. Who is she? Who is this girl? They may as well have called it Clara Who. But I get what you mean. It's like she's not the main character, you know, so that's why it's not as influential. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'd never thought about the Clara moments like that before until you mentioned the whole thing about we'll call it, you know, like the superiority aspect. Mm-hmm. Because I think you have so many brilliant companions, you know, that we all know and love. And like you say, if you want to make Clara the most important character in his world in the present, cool. But to have her influence those key moments, so, you know, it's like in An Unearthly Child, it's like, oh, he's only in 1960s London or whatever because Clara told him to get in that box. Or, he's only being brave against these monsters because Clara told him to. Do you know what I mean? That's it.
Yeah.
Is it that similar way of thinking as the whole Jodie thing? So, yeah, fair play.
I would say in the whole Clara thing is like in series 9 when she finally leaves, a lot of people hated Hellbent. That's the second one, right? Heaven Sent's the first one.
Oh, I love Hellbent. Personally,
when it first aired, I hated Hellbent.
Okay.
Now it's one of my favorite episodes. And the reason for that is if you accept that Clara is as important as Moffat has said she is, then it's an incredible character episode. I mean, it's fantastic. The reason people hated it is because we thought it was gonna be about Gallifrey, and he made it about Clara. But if you accept that it's going to be about Clara, then it's fantastic. I love it. And it's also beautifully shot. Like, it's really gorgeous when he's walking through the orange desert. Oh, it's amazing. Man.
So many, like, good vistas there. I think I've got a poster of Hellbent somewhere in my room, just, like, from that vista. But, yeah, no, I loved Hellbent as well. And like you say, I didn't view it as, like, you know, the Gallifrey episode. Like, it was cool we were back on Gallifrey. But, yeah, it was more the character moments between the Doctor and Clara. And, again, quick sidetrack. You know the thing in Twice Upon a Time when he, like, remembers Clara at the end? Mm-hmm. I thought that was a little bit like Moffat trying to repeat what he did with Matt Smith, you know, the whole seeing Amy at the end, the first face, this face saw thing. I mean, I thought it, because, yeah, again, benefit of hindsight, of course, but when you watch Hellbent now, and, you know, this whole impact, and, you know, you'll never forget the first time, you know, you watched it on transmission and how, like, momentous it was that the Doctor now, you know, had no memory of his impossible girl anymore. But now when you watch Hellbent, you know, it's like, oh, well, he won't remember her now, but, you know, give it another year and he'll remember her again. I don't know what you thought. I just thought, like, yeah, it was nice to see her at the end of Capaldi's run, but I just thought, like, you could have left it. Like, I don't know.
I would have, so personally, the way I would have done that is he goes in the TARDIS and before he regenerates, he strums her theme on his guitar. And then he gives a speech. You know, because then it's like, maybe he remembers her. Maybe he doesn't. We don't know. And then just move on. But I think at that point, Moffat was sort of running out of ideas. Because at the end of Series 10 is like the exact same as the end of Series 9. Because in Series 9, you had Clara and me, who basically get a TARDIS and they can go fly around space and they're both immortal. And then at the end of Series 10, you get Bill
and Heather.
Heather, yeah. And they get magic powers. They can fly around space and they're immortal. Like, all right, Moffat, come on.
Oh, yeah, okay, dude. Like, you can mask this all you like, but it's the same plot. I mean, I must admit, I wonder sometimes, like, what would the show have been like if Moffat had gone with Matt Smith? Do you know what I mean? Like, left with his Doctor, so to speak.
Oh.
Like, I always wonder, like, what would have happened. Not saying Chibnall would have taken over when Capaldi took over, but I just think that was, like, a key point. Because you know how he said in, you know, now that the 50th anniversary year basically, like, wiped him out, basically. You know, with everything going on, it, like, drove him to the edge, and how Peter Capaldi was, like, the one main reason he stayed on. Do you know what I mean? It's an interesting what if, isn't it? Like, what if Moffat did leave? Like, what would the Capaldi era, and maybe even the Jodie era, have looked like? But that's for Big Finish to do an alternative spin-off. Basically, any thoughts fans have, you just submit them to Big Finish, and they're like, yeah, we'll do that. So,
I mean, that's sort of what I'm doing. Is I had like 3 story ideas, and the rest of the series, I'm like, hey, send me stuff. And some people have some real gold. Let me tell you, I'm very excited.
Yeah. No, cool. On that note, unless there was anything else you wanted to close off with on the Timeless Children, because we've beaten it. We've really beaten it. But honestly, if there was anything like burning that you wanted to get off about it, like, please feel free.
Not the Timeless Children. I mean, if you like what I had to say, just go watch my video about it. I'm much more concise and mean there. But no, I feel like I could have a whole conversation just like this about Chibnall's writing specifically, not even touching the Timeless Children.
That's fair.
Yeah. But we can move on.
Well, sure. Well, do you want to talk like a bit about Chibnall's writing and stuff? Just like a summary of like why you don't like it, basically. If you can do a summary.
You know what? Let me pick just one thing, and I'll just go on that.
Okay.
And this kind of ties into, so we were talking about like the writing, and you were saying like Chibnall has this thing where he'll create a mystery and he'll kind of forget about it. I have like an example. So in Spyfall, how did the Doctor discover that O was actually the Master? He just
sorry, yeah. Well, he said it as much, didn't he, on the plane?
Yeah, he just told her. He just said it. So
Yeah.
then the question is, well, why did he tell her that? And the answer is, she pointed out one inconsistency in something that he had said absentmindedly, that he was never a good runner, right?
Yeah.
He could have just said, like, oh, I was being sarcastic. He could have just, like, dismissed it, but he didn't. He immediately gave up on that point. Then, the little anecdote that she pointed out about him running, it was something that the audience had not been told prior to the scene. We didn't know that he was a sprinter, right? So there's no way we as the audience could have put that together. It was all in the doctor's head. So that's kind of how Chibnall writes all of his mysteries. It's basically stuff that it's like you get one shock value, like, oh my god, the master's back. And then that's it. If you read a story where you sprinkle in the hints beforehand so the audience has the potential to figure out beforehand, then you have rewatch value. Then you can go back and be like, oh my god, I missed that. Like, if my favorite episode is Heaven Sent, because it does that perfectly.
Beautiful.
There's bird written in the sand. You know, you know what the skulls are. You notice the clothes that are, like, you can put all those together after you've seen it once. With Spyfall, it's like, oh, he's the master.
Yeah, like, now, as you say, when you rewatch it, the minute you see O, like, you're just like, well, that's the master. Like, without any, as you say, the hints to pick up on it. And I think, that seems to be how Chibnall writes the whole shock value, like, you know, shock value first, like, anything else later. And I think for Doctor Who, as you say, especially Modern Who, that is a detriment, because I think what Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat did so well, I mean, you know, it's like the whole series arcs, isn't it? Like, you know, the whole Bad Wolf thing. When they sort of flash back all those moments in the last two-parter of all those moments, Bad Wolf. Because I remember the first time I watched Series 1, you hear it, but you don't pick up on it, do you? Like, oh, Bad Wolf 1 descending, like, go to Bad Wolf base, you know, all those little things, you don't pick up on it. And it's like you say, it has the rewatch value. So yes, I agree with you there that Chibnall seems to be more about the shock thing. I mean, the whole Timeless Child thing, I mean, remember it got mentioned in the Ghost Monument in Series 11? And then by the end of Series 11, we thought he'd forgotten about it because it hadn't gotten mentioned. And on one hand, I was like, fair play for, like, saving it, like, to the next season. But I think if you're going to save it to the next season, you need to pepper it more in that first season because, correct me if I'm wrong, that mention of the Timeless Child in the Ghost Monument was the only mention of it in Series 11, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think for sure, like, fans like us, you know, we nitpick it and all that. So we're gonna remember it. We're gonna bank it. But I think more so for the casual viewer, like, when it gets brought up again, and they're like, oh, this is what, you know, was said in the Ghost Monument. They'll be like, wait, what? You know, this one moment that got said for like 5 seconds. I just don't think he's a very, well, in terms of Doctor Who, I don't think he's a very, like, general audience viewer friendly writer, if that makes sense. In terms of when he's trying to intersperse the lore. When he's just doing, like, a basic Monster of the Week story, it's fine. But when he's doing all the lore stuff, I don't think he's a very audience-friendly writer.
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. If you're gonna have these, even if it's not, like, a singular mystery story, if it's a piece of lore that you're gonna touch on later and expand, you need to pepper it in, right? Like, you need to constantly remind the audience about it. Otherwise, it's just a singular callback. It's not a plot thread.
Yes, exactly. And that's basically when Series 12 started, whenever the Timeless Child was first mentioned in Series 12, they literally played the 5 seconds from the Ghost Monument, and anyone who either didn't see Series 11 or just forgot about it will be like, wait, when did this happen? Because it was only mentioned that one time. And I just hope it gets sort of... I think it's a fine line, isn't it, with, like, series arcs like that? Like, there are times when you can do it overkill. Like, I'd always argue the... which was the one I thought was overkill? I think it was the whole, you know, the Tennant specials, the four knocks, whatever.
Oh yeah.
I thought, in my opinion, it was good. I liked it, but I thought as soon as it got mentioned in the first one, the Planet of the Dead, like, I don't think, because there was only 4 stories, it didn't need to be as hammered in as it was in the remaining 3. I think they played on it a bit too much, but again, that's just my subjective opinion. Or the one arc I didn't like, personally, was Series 6 with Matt Smith, because I think, and I've mentioned this before, so regular listeners know what I'm talking about, but you know that whole thing in the first episode, the Doctor gets shot and is dead, that whole aspect.
Yeah.
I thought as soon as that happened, all the stakes for the season were off, because we know the Doctor's not gonna... when you say the Doctor's going to die, it's got to be done in a way where there's genuine suspense. Doing that at the start of a season and then like working backwards, for me, didn't work, because even when we got to the Wedding of River Song, we knew the Doctor wasn't going to die because he's the main character. And, you know, we didn't have a regeneration incoming, etc., etc. So I thought that whole arc didn't work as like a thing for audiences to pick up on. I don't know what you thought about it, but I just think it didn't work.
Well, in terms of Series 6, I think that was one of the less tightly written 11th Doctor series. I think you're partially right. So you can do a story where you kill the main character in the first episode and then work backwards with time travel. I don't think they did it well. I think the problem was they took a detour from that story to do the whole River Song thing. Those are really two mysteries that they kind of intertwined together. I totally get what Moffat was trying to do, but he just didn't execute properly. I'd have to study it a little bit more, but like that's my basic. You could do it well, is my main point.
Yeah, that could be like your next mega project and an analysis of Series 6 and why. Well, why, in my humble opinion, it doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, do you think, in terms of villain writing in the Chibnall era, that Chibnall writes his villains well? Because I always found I thought Russell T Davies wrote his villains brilliantly, personally. Moffat, I think he wrote some of them perfectly, but the villains that were more like the old staples, like the Daleks and the Cybermen, I felt in the Moffat era, more often than not, they were treated more as like fodder to something else, which I didn't like personally. I think the Cybermen and Daleks are at their best when they're written to be feared, like Dalek in the Eccleston era, or the Cybermen two-parter in David Tennant's first season on the Parallel World. I think those work great, because not only are the Cybermen and the Daleks the main focus in those episodes, but they're given the writing and the development as characters to be threatening. Whereas in Moffat's era, like, the amount of, you know, like Dalek cameos or Cybermen cameos and the stories that are dedicated to them, I just don't think hold any weight. But so how do you think Chibnall writes his villains by comparison?
Well, let me touch on what you said about Moffat really quick.
Sure.
I think the reason that you feel that way about how he does the Daleks and the Cybermen is because he has this tendency to try to build stakes by throwing every villain at you at once.
Oh my god, yes.
We'll see Daleks and Weeping Angels and Santarans and Cybermen and Silurians all together. I think that happened like 3 times during his run, you know?
Yeah.
So you don't have time to focus on them, number one, so they're less scary. Number two, you've seen them so much that they're not special anymore, right?
Yeah.
I think those are the 2 reasons that Moffat's, at least the mainstay villains, didn't seem as threatening.
Yeah, it's like when he kept saying, like, every time we'd have a Dalek or Cyberman story, in the interviews it'd be like, oh, we're making them scary again. And it just got to a point where I didn't believe him, because it wasn't true, quite frankly. I mean, I remember being so excited for, you know, Asylum of the Daleks when that first came out. Mm-hmm. And he said there's this whole section of Daleks that have, like, gone even more insane, like they're more deranged. And I was really excited, because obviously Daleks, when they're written well, can be, you know, terrifying anyway. But the idea of like an even more deranged Dalek that is like so unhinged, I thought that could have been really terrifying. And there was like 1 or 2 slight moments where I thought they were leaning towards that. But then we have to have a joke where Rory thinks a Dalek saying eggs instead of exterminate. And then the whole thing's ruined. But do you know what I mean? It's like the moments where you think it's going to get scary for the Daleks, like in that instance, he feels like he has to throw in like either comedy or something that dampens it. It's like he wants to make it scary, but not too scary. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I think they could have taken it further.
That tonal balance is tough to strike. And I guess when you've been writing so much Doctor Who for so long, and this isn't a defense, like I agree with you that he handled those poorly. I guess when you've been writing Doctor Who for so long, like you feel the need to do the scene differently than other people have done it, right?
Sure, yeah.
So like Daleks have always been scary in this exact way that they happen to work perfectly. I have to do it differently, or I have to put a joke here. I think you should, if you're going to write a Dalek story, which I have not done yet, you should have them be scary just because they are Daleks and make some other element of the story new and interesting. Like, I mean, they're ruthless and evil and they want to kill everybody. You don't need to do anything else.
Yeah. No, that's true. But I mean, I think, especially with the revival era, I think what makes the Daleks more terrifying is not when they're given dialogue that's more human, but is inherently not like part of their stable of like 7 or 8 catchphrases. So, you know, they're not just saying exterminate or seek, locate, annihilate. Do you know what I mean? Like in Dalek, the Eccleston one, where it's just the one, that scene where the Dalek and Eccleston are just talking in the cage. In fact, throughout the whole episode, the Dalek has, I think it's been given more like, you know, conversational lines that you can develop on. And it's hard to strike because the Dalek's only really, if it's got any emotions, it's only meant to have like hatred. But I think if the Daleks are written in that way where the Doctor or whoever can have more of a conversation, depending on what the Dalek says and how you write it, I think that can be terrifying. Like when we all first heard, you know, the Dalek say back to Eccleston, "You would make a good Dalek," I found that horrifying because the fact that the Dalek has come up with that concoction to then like fire back, I think it provides real horror. So I think that's how I find the Daleks more scary, when they're not just written as these things that just simply go exterminate or seek, locate, and do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's absolutely. So that's the thing, is like there's different types of fear. And so in that particular, so normally Daleks are very much just a basic physical fear. They're going to shoot me and kill me. But in that instance, it was very much like a fear that's rooted in your loss of yourself, right? Like the Doctor genuinely questioned who he was or if the Dalek was right. That's completely different from physical fear, and that's why it was so compelling. And so if you're gonna do the Daleks differently, maybe the fear that you're trying to concoct should come from they have some ruthless strategy that isn't based on just shooting someone, but sacrificing a race of people to kill a different race of people or something like that, you know? Like creatively make them scary, not just shoot or yell. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of writers forget, like, the Daleks are meant to be, like, fiercely intelligent as well. Mm-hmm. And I think showing more of their manipulative side, if you like how they can manipulate either the Doctor or other people to meet their own ends. And, like, I love the way the Supreme Dalek was written for, you know, in the Stolen Earth Journey's End. Like, the moment when the Doctor thinks the TARDIS has been destroyed in the core of the Crucible. And what does the Supreme Dalek say? Is like, you know, how do you feel? Anger, sorrow, despair. And, you know, if emotions are so important, then surely we've enhanced you. It's almost, you know, like mocking him. But I think that strikes a different, like you say, a different fear from, like, the physical fear of a Dalek. The fact that a Dalek is capable of manipulating someone or using, you know, words to twist someone, you know, in such a way, I think that's an element of the Daleks that hasn't really been touched upon that greatly, not just in the Chibnall era, but certainly in the Moffat era as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we started this conversation, we wanted to talk about Chibnall.
Yes, yeah.
We got really sidetracked.
As Doctor Who fans do, we talk about one thing and then you spiral. But yes, back to Chibnall, yeah.
I think he does, as I think most things Chibnall does, I think he does an awful job with his villains. And the reason I say that is because they're almost always completely one-dimensional, or they're just ripped off from something else.
Sure, yeah.
So, like, you have the concept of the lone Cyberman, right?
Yeah.
And you have, like, this, is it like more human than a regular Cyberman is? Is there supposed to be like something left over? Are we going back into this body horror type concept? Is it gonna have like emotions? No, not really. It has a death particle, which is a really dumb idea. Okay, what about Tim Shaw? He's like the first Chibnall series main villain. Okay, what's his deal? He's just the Predator but boring. Like, that's there's nothing interesting about him. He doesn't have a catchphrase. He doesn't have gravitas. He's not extra scary. He's just bad guy TM. You know what I mean?
He's just got teeth in his face.
Yeah, exactly. Teeth in his face. The worst, the absolute worst is Krasko, the space racist. Because
I thought that episode would have been, I really enjoyed Rosa, but it would have been even better if he was not a thing, like if he was not in the episode at all.
I think there's a couple ways I think you can make Rosa better. But if we're just going to focus on Krasko for a second, why is he racist? Did she, like, that would be interesting. Maybe try to break into, well, what makes people racist? Because if we can understand that, maybe we can stop them from being racist. That would be, a good lesson for kids. It would be interesting to talk about. No, he's just from the future, and he's white, and he's angry about it.
Yeah, I think this is something Chibnall, and I know not all writers, he didn't write all stories, but as the showrunner, he would have had some influence, say, over all scripts, or he would have had to approve them. But I think when it comes to messages like that, whether it's racism or in Series 12, when it's plastic pollution or climate change, I think, like you say, with the racism thing, he just really makes like a big point of it. He shoves it in your face. Like, look, this is the problem. Racism is the problem. Plastic pollution is the problem. But it's not done in like a subtle way. Because I found to the point where in Praxeus and Orphan 55, I felt like those messages were being beaten around my head so much. It was like, just stop. Like, I get it. Climate change is bad. Plastic pollution is bad. You can tell me that in a much more subtle and, I'd argue, impactful way than literally just like zooming out on a sea of plastic and going, gee, this is bad, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And I feel that was the problem with Krasko. He's racist. Racism is bad. Yes. Racism is a problem. Yes. Like, but you could have done that in so many more subtle ways. Like, do you remember the story Human Nature, the Family of Blood in Tennant's time?
Yeah, love it.
You know when Martha's posing to be like, the servant girl and she's cleaning the floor, and then I can't remember exactly what he says, but one of the students makes like that really sly racist comment about her, like, how she, like, either she's made for this sort of work or she doesn't expect, her kind to understand. Do you know what I mean? Something basically insulting her because of her race. And it's not the focus of the whole episode. The whole two-parter is not, gee, we're in 1913. British people are pretty racist, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? That's not the conversation. But that one little line, I think, holds more impact about how racism is bad than Krasko just being, he may as well wear a sign saying, I'm racist, did you know? So, yeah, I just think, I think that's the problem with Chibnall when it comes to messaging, how he feels like he has to really poster it everywhere. Like, there can be no subtlety with a serious message with him. It's got to be out there. Otherwise, people aren't going to get it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I made 4 videos about why I didn't like the writing of Series 11. This was before Series 12 came out. And one of them is all about the politics. Because, so, like, a lot of people will say, like, well, Doctor Who's too political now. Oh, well, that can't be true. It's always been political. But I think what a lot of people don't understand, it's like, what if Nintendo released a new Mario game and Mario's shoes, pants, shirt, gloves, skin, hair, eyes, and hat were all completely red? And people were like, well, wait, there's too much red. And then other people were like, he's always been red, you idiot. Do you see what I mean? It's the same thing. It's Doctor Who absolutely should have political episodes, but they shouldn't be the focus. And when they are, they should be, how do I put it? They should make you think about the subject. They shouldn't tell you what to think about it, right? Because if they tell you what to think, if they're like, racism is bad, that's not a story, that's propaganda. And that's not necessarily a bad message, obviously, but it's not entertaining to watch. You know what I mean? And if it's not entertaining to watch, it doesn't matter if it's a good message because no one's going to see it.
Exactly, and in terms of especially reaching out to kids, to children, I would argue put a kid in front of a TV, show them that scene with Martha that I mentioned, where this guy makes one sly comment and the reaction to it. I bet a kid obviously of an age will know that that's wrong, or they'll pick up on that that's wrong, more so than, Krasko outwardly going around with his poster saying I'm racist. And I think, like you say, Doctor Who can have political episodes. It can talk about serious topics. Of course it should. Like, you could argue to some extent the show's always done that. But I think what Chibnall's problem is as showrunner, at least, I know he doesn't write all the episodes, but as showrunner, it's the messages are too, as you say, in your face, and like, you have to be told. Like, what is it in Arachnids in the UK? The whole thing with Trump.
Oh my God.
I can't remember how they say it exactly. It was like, oh, that's why you wanted, like, Trump out of office or something. I can't remember what the exact phrase was, but I remember the way they said, like, you could have alluded to it so much better and subtly than literally bringing it up. And I think that's the whole problem with the political / social message side of this era, if that makes sense, that it is just all, it's in your face. It's here. You can't ignore it because we're telling you. There's no, you're not allowing the audience to think, oh, gee, maybe they're talking about this issue. And this is why, like you say, it's a spur of thought, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's the thing is, if I think if you're gonna write a fun TV show that has a message, then you should design it that no matter who watches it, they get to thinking about the same thing, right? So, like, if I was a Trump supporter and I watched that episode, that's not gonna convince me that Trump is a bad guy. You know what I mean? It's just gonna piss me off. And if you hate Trump and you watch that episode, you're not given any insight into, like, why do you think people support him? It's just like, oh, he's obviously terrible. Like, you get nothing out of it. You know what I mean? And that's true for all of the episodes. Plastic ocean's bad. Like, that's the whole message. That's not gonna convince me if I already didn't care. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's almost like they probably don't think this, but it's almost like they think the audience isn't like smart or adaptive enough to draw these conclusions themselves without them actually shoving it in our face, if that makes sense. That's how it comes across sometimes. Like the whole speech with Orphan 55, well, I didn't have a problem with it in concept, but the way it was like slammed in, it's almost like they thought, gee, maybe Adam doesn't understand what climate change is. We better tell him. Do you know what I mean? That's how it comes across to me, at least.
Orphan 55 was one of the worst, not only because it was so blatant, but at the end, the doctor literally like turns to the camera and says, "Guys, this is what Earth will be if you don't stop polluting." It's like I feel like we're in the 80s, you know, we're getting like a public service announcement.
It's odd because when she starts saying like, "Oh, you want me to tell you it's going to be all okay, but I can't because it won't be," essentially. I like that, like the start of where it's going, because I like the fact that the Doctor isn't just telling people what they want to hear. Like, it's that side of the Doctor that is always, you could argue, has been present with all the incarnations. You know, when the Doctor has to be straight with something, you know, they're straight about it.
Yeah.
And I thought it was leaning into that, and I liked it. So I was like, yeah, Jodie's not just like, yeah, it's fine. Like, in like 3,000 years, you figure out how to decompose plastic and the Earth is safe. Do you know what I mean? So when it started, I was like, okay, like, I'm with this. I want to see where this goes. But then very quickly, as you say, it turned into an 80s public service announcement, and it just got very slammed in. And that's where I think it goes wrong. You can even do a speech about it like that, but just have it more either subtle or more intriguing or more related to the characters in the moment, rather than, like you say, almost pointing out of the screen and going, "Remember, kids, don't throw your plastic bottles in the ocean, because then we're going to get like evil birds that will eat you," or whatever the hell that episode was. So I definitely agree with you on that. And I'll just say, we could be here for 3 hours, and if it wasn't like midnight here in the UK, I'd be all for it. But if you want to know more views on Beware's on like the Chibnall era, or your views, just check out your channel, because you've got several videos about it, right? Like about this like whole era and what you've got to criticize and whatnot.
Yeah, I have a 4-part miniseries called Unlucky 13 that just talks about Series 11. And I'm pretty fair about it. I'm not like an angry guy who yells about it. So I think, you know, if you want an interesting deconstruction,
yeah. No, I like that. Well, yeah, that's why, even though it was more positive for Capaldi's era, I like your videos in the sense that, again, you offer everything with, like, you know, constructive evidence or opinion. It's not unbridled praise, but it's not, you know, downright hatred either. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate your style on that, which is good. And before we close off, I wanted to ask you, because obviously Doctor Who is it's made in Britain. It's a British TV show. As an American yourself, just out of a stupid Brit's curiosity like mine, what to you makes Doctor Who so appealing? Because you could argue in many ways it's quite a British show in a way.
Yeah, so I'll say this. There's a lot of like little bits of humor or cultural like little comments and stuff that I just don't get. They fly right over my head because I'm an American. Sure. But I think what really sold me on Doctor Who when I was watching Series 1 was the episode Dalek. And the reason is because you had this main character who is amazing. He's incredible. He's this genius, and he seems to be this like awesome guy. But there's this very deep, dark something inside of him that you get a little peek at. And just this character, the character is what sold me, really, because all of the work that they've done with it since, with Tennant and Smith and especially Capaldi, that's why I keep watching it. That's what really brings me into the show.
Yeah,
it's really just the character work, and also a lot of the music in sci-fi is cool.
yeah, it is. I mean, Murray Golden. I mean, I like Segun Akinola's stuff. Do you like his stuff for the Chibnall era, or?
Okay, so I like 13's theme. I think it's a good theme. I don't like most of his other stuff because it's so atmospheric and empty. I actually had a comment on that. How much time do we have left? I don't want to like...
Oh, no, it's all right. Probably like wrap up soon, but like feel free to elaborate on this point. Don't worry. Go ahead.
Okay, so here's my example, right? My favorite episode is Heaven Sent, and we have this beautiful piece of music called Breaking the Wall. It exemplifies the Doctor's emotional journey through the whole episode, right? It's his character arc. This person he's becoming, the man who will never back down, no matter how ridiculous the odds, as he's punching through this insane wall over billions of years. So then, in the next series, there was this focus on doing the right thing in extremis, without any hope for reward. You know, you've seen Series 10, right?
Yeah.
And so then, the end of Series 10, he just wants to die, and as he's giving this speech, we hear Breaking the Wall. We hear that song again, and it represents that he's breaking through his final wall. He's choosing to keep living even though he really doesn't want to. And it just, I hear it and I tear up because it's so good. He makes the choice to let go of the Doctor, right? So then we get The Timeless Children, which is supposed to be this incredible, huge moment for the Doctor, right? Like earth-shattering, her entire past is different.
Yeah.
And they just played the titles theme. You know what I mean? Like, there's
like the theme remix.
Yeah. So that's how I feel a lot about the Chibnall era music. It's very empty, and there's not as much thought and like love put into it. Murray Gold is amazing to me. I love Murray Gold.
Oh, he was, and I loved how at the very end of Twice Upon a Time, when Jodie had just appeared and he played, the Doctor's theme again, like one last time, almost like that was, a sign off for like the whole Murray Gold era, if you like. I don't know. I just thought the way, I know it's mainly associated with the Ninth Doctor, but the way it was done, I was like, this is beautiful. This just sums up like the last 12 years in a nutshell. And away from, like, just building on the music again, like you say, that moment when Capaldi dies, like, when you break it down, like say, it's a really dark moment. Like I say, he wants to die. Like he wants out. Like he's done. And I think Capaldi sells that speech so well. I mean, he sells anything well, quite frankly, but he sells. I think he sells that speech so well that you go from the start of it where you have this Doctor who wants nothing more than to just rest. Just to, well, in terms of death, but to die. From, as you say, somehow convincing himself to keep going. And I think for me, that's why I enjoy Jodie's portrayal, in the sense that a lot of people complain that she's too, like, fun-loving, like she's too chirpy or whatever. And I'd argue we got more of, like, that darker side, that something other you mentioned that you first saw in Dalek. I'd argue we got more of that in Series 12. It wasn't really in Series 11, but we got more of it. Maybe not enough. But I loved how Jodie just was really fun-loving to begin with, especially, like, those first few episodes of Series 11. I had a lot of fun with it because it was like a joy to see this character who had been at like the lowest of lows, like wanting to die, just enjoy life again. I don't know, you might not have felt the same, but I enjoyed that so much from her portrayal, just how much fun she's having going around the universe, and that just, it rubbed a bit off on me. Well, I know I'm in like the minority probably.
I love that concept so much that it's what I'm doing for my version of the 13th Doctor. He's literally, I designed him as like the eternal optimist, this person who is just loves life, because I think that would be the psychological reaction to wanting to die and choosing to live. Like, if you would have to do something like that. But I think the primary difference is I'm trying to write the Doctor in such a way that you can tell there's something under the surface, and that this incredible optimism is not, it can never be that simple, because if it were that simple, then this would be, a storybook with sunshine and rainbows, and you don't go through what the 12th Doctor did and come out perfectly unscathed. And so
of course,
you're talking about the darkness in Jodie's performance. I did not get that.
Okay.
Certainly not Series 11, and I don't think in Series 12 either. I think she gets mildly angry like once or twice, but I think that's more Chibnall's fault than Jodie's. She goes and sees Gallifrey burned to the ground, and she just like sits down and throws a remote. Like,
Yeah.
give her an angry speech. Let her yell. Let her act. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I feel like we're not getting that, and we really should.
Sure. I mean, for me, that moment, I thought, well, she sold me on it when, maybe not in terms of anger, but certainly in terms of that darker side, when she saw Gallifrey, you know, that shot where she's like just looking out of the TARDIS door, like that sold me on like her reaction. Like, just from an acting point of view, I thought was brilliant. She didn't even need to say anything. But yes, she could have had an angry speech, absolutely. But I think there were moments throughout the series, like when she tells her companions, like, you know, how long have you been here? You don't really know me. Or in Haunting of Villa Diodati, after the lone Cyberman disappears with Shelley, and she talks about, like, you know, this team structure's not flat. I'm at the summit of this mountain here. I think they could have gone into it more, and had they done it in Series 11 first, it could have been deeper in Series 12. But I'm hoping in Series 13, and I agree with you, it's probably more Chibnall than Jodie, because I think when Jodie does those bits, like that there are, I think she's fantastic. I think she nails it, I believe her, but I need to see more of it. Do you know what I mean? I want to see more of this, that other side of the Doctor that is always lingering, I think, especially from the modern revival. I mean, how many times did Tennant exhibit that darkness, and we bought it absolutely? Like when he drowns the Rachnos, for example, and Donna has to get him to stop.
Yeah, you're talking about wanting more, and you actually gave an example, which is right to my point that I made earlier about like how Graham talked to Yaz. The Doctor says that there's more under the surface, but she doesn't show it. It's this show don't tell rule that we're not getting, because if the 10th Doctor is angry, he drowns the Rachnos, right? If the 13th Doctor is angry, she tells people that she's angry. You get what I mean?
Yes. Yeah,
that is
I
the
get
problem
you.
in the writing, and that's why you're feeling like I want more, because you're not actually getting anything. You're just being told.
Yeah.
That's how I think.
And I think No, I agree, and I think those moments, like, again, the end of Family of Blood, you know, when the Doctor deals with the family in all those different ways, like, you know, one gets trapped in a black hole or whatever, one has to be a scarecrow for the rest of its life, one's always hiding in a mirror. It never implicitly tells, you know, they never implicitly tell you how he does that, how he has the means to do that, but I think that gives the Doctor even more of that mystery we were talking about, the fact he just can do these things, and he does it without saying a word, and because he's angry. I think that adds the mystique and power to the Doctor that 13 doesn't have just yet. I'm hoping they implement more of that. But again, I think basically, as you can probably tell from the last hour, I'm hinging a lot on Series 13 being, like, better written or more, like, in-depth than we've got so far. Like, that's not to say I haven't enjoyed Series 11 and 12 to an extent, but I do acknowledge, like, you know, they're not perfect. There are many problems. And I think I'm just hoping Series 13, whenever it comes out, will be better, quite frankly.
Well, yeah, how you feel about Series 13 is how I felt waiting for Series 12. And when it disappointed me, that's when I gave up. I guess that's how I put it.
Hey, maybe after season 13 I might give up too, who knows, but I mean it really depends when it comes out, because I mean with the world shutting down this year, everything's going to be delayed, so who knows when it's eventually going to come. But I think we're going to start to wrap things up here. First of all, man, again, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real joy to talk and debate about this stuff. I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely, thanks for having me. I did have a lot of fun.
Oh, good, man. Do you want to shout out sort of like your channel, any of your particular works or your social medias, just so people can know where you are?
Sure. Yeah, you can, mainly follow me on YouTube, Beware. I really appreciate it if you check out the big video I just dropped the other day. It's episode 1 of our season 11 rewrite. It's called Clear Skies. I'm really proud of it. People seem to really like it. It's not vindictive or hateful towards the Jodie era. We just kind of pretend it didn't happen. So even if you really love the Jodie era, I'd recommend you check it out because it's still fun Doctor Who. And we're not getting that right now because of the quarantine.
Yeah, it's just artistic interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I mean, we have like the Shaka Doctor, right? And we also have Christopher Eccleston.
Oh, yes.
Both great, you know?
Don't forget the Rowan Atkinson Doctor.
Who could forget? I'll explain later.
Yeah, I'll explain. Just all of those Doctors. Bring them back. They're canon now. Like, they're going to be... You watch. Give it 5 more years. We'll have another Dimensions in Time where there'll be, like, random actors and... Dimensions in time. I need another drink. Nah, but that's great, man. I'll put some of your links to like your big video especially. I'll put that in the description. There'll be cards and stuff throughout the video. Again, guys, go and check out BeWare's channel. He makes some really great content, especially this big video. I'm going to listen to the whole episode. Say I listened to the first 10 minutes. Really enjoyed it. I'm going to listen to the rest. And yeah, just check out his stuff. Even if, you agree, disagree, it's always good to get as many opinions as possible. But BeWare, man, thank you so much for coming on today.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
No problem. And for all you listening, we will see you next time. This program has been brought to you in part by our producer and director patrons. With your support, you help keep AMTV running and the programs coming to your screens. Thank you. And that does bring us to the end of another evening here on AMTV. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we hope to see you next time. Good night.